when you think about it, though, there are something on the order of, I forget the number now, 66 6 trillion, something to that effect, galaxies. It's mind-boggling, the number, certainly, of planets, let alone so-called exoplanets, that have been identified. And obviously, there's life elsewhere, and certainly much more advanced life. The hypothesis is such that they're coming here from there. And of course, one has to consider quantum physics and the wormhole theories that have been proposed. And many leading physicists, like Einstein, for one, believe that wormholes allow them to get here from there in a blink of an eye, in the folding of space, and thus you reduce distance considerably. So, maybe so. Yet to be proven, but theoretically a possibility. Multiverse, again, leading theorists, as I mentioned earlier, believe that alternative realities exist that coexist with ours. Some benign, maybe some not benign, which may account for the horrific experiences many individuals do report to have. And you have had direct personal communication with them. And you know firsthand and how traumatizing it can be. We don't know, obviously, why that is the case, what that objective was on their part, but all their objectives may be, and they may certainly be very different. So, I don't know what we're dealing with. Something from far, far away, something from right in front of our face, but in a different, non-local, so to speak, space-time environment. Or, as some people propose, that they're from the future. This is something that Stephen Hawking, a contemporary leading theoretical physicist, contends is, in his mind at least, based on his experiments, or math, shall we say, impossible. Doesn't mean he's right. That is often interpreted by many ufologists, researchers, that the alien abduction phenomena, in part, subserves the need to modify to their advantage DNA material, using our sperms and eggs as a gene pool. So maybe that is the case. I don't know if that's a bold leap trying to connect those dots or not. Is that the reason for the alien abduction phenomenon? Why do people report that they have been on board the so-called craft? Shapes vary considerably, from circles to disc shapes, saucer shape. That's the most common, but they vary in range and size from 10, 20 feet to miles long. They come in all different shapes, sizes, colors, speeds, you name it, and GM makes them. So, but people have unusual encounters, not necessarily only being on a physical craft, which they have described in detail. And pilots have described this in detail. Okay, we learned something about their physical maneuverability, their physical size, shape, color, kinematic behavior. That tells us something. A piece of grain on all the sands of all the beaches. It's informative. But the point here is that what? We simply need to address prospective approaches along the lines we're talking about. Focus more on the human element. Still do serious scientific studies. Try to create a stronger foundation upon which future research can build upon. Not that we're going to have all the answers. Now, we may be barking up the wrong tree or down the wrong rabbit hole. I'm not entirely sure, but I think based on historical evidence, given that we have evolved relatively very slowly, despite many decades of research since the 40s and 50s, that we consider taking a different qualitative, personal approach, something that has been done very, very little in the past by noted researchers in the field, ufology groups. There's been one study done by Martin and Stoner a few years back, a questionnaire to maybe 25 individuals who claim to have had contact. This is also hypnotic regressive therapy, which is okay. And the point is, the majority of subjects reported quite unique experiences relative to a normalized control group of non-experiencers. So, indication something is going on. Okay, we got to take that to the next level, which Free is attempting to do. There'll be other levels, of course, involved in the future. But this is the direction we go. I know we've said this 2-3 times again, but I think this is the most strongest urgent message that I think has to be gotten across. I'm not unique in this respect. I'm just one person of a few others, maybe more, who advocate along the same lines. And I appreciate the opportunity to share my perspectives, which can certainly be completely off base. I'm the first one to admit that. But the readers of my book, the listeners of the show, will obviously be in the position to judge. But all I'm doing is trying to, as best as possible, present possibilities, the facts as I see them, evidence, which is well known, and more importantly, what we need to do tomorrow to better understand the unique foundation and meaning, importance, implications of this phenomenon. Does it have anything to do with continuity of consciousness? I don't know. Maybe it does.
Well, and I certainly would like to travel down that road with you as far as the continuity of consciousness is concerned, because that's something that most UFO researchers and people that I have on the show haven't really spoken about much, and so it's quite refreshing to go down that path. But I do have to tell you, we do have a question, and again, if you don't know the answer to the questions, it's all good, but one of the viewers has asked if there had been any data on friendlies versus the non-friendlies.
Not to my knowledge, and if any data has been obtained, it would be highly skeptical and tentative at best. I would like to certainly see that data. Nevertheless, coming out of our results, we alluded to it very briefly earlier, there are people that have good and bad experiences. I don't know if that's symptomatic of friendlies and non-friendlies, however. Some people even contend there's ongoing wars up there among friendlies and non-friendlies. I'm not exactly sure what kind of context of questions we can put in. But, good and evil. Maybe that's been the way of looking at it too, and from what people say, it may very well be that is the case. Be careful who you speak to if you're able to speak to them at all. But they may very well have different missions.
Well, and yeah, and I would have to agree with that statement. Is how do we determine who's a friendly and who's a non-friendly? By what action? By what is it that would make one a friendly and not another a friendly? There has to be some differentiation there for sure. With that, in my opinion as well. But I have never heard of anybody specifically speaking on any data that any kind of analysis had ever been taken in regards to that particular question. Okay, has anyone stated in their report that this was a good contact or this was a bad contact in regards to your report of those 600 people that you pulled out of the 2,500? Do you want me to repeat the question?
Yeah, I do see it. Yeah, there is good contact, there is bad contact. We sort of touched upon that, both of us, in varying ways earlier. And some people have dramatic, adverse psychological consequences. That's long-standing. That's in need of attention. That's in need of professional like you have been involved with. And again, I can't commend you more for the help you provided these poor individuals who have suffered greatly as a result. And yes, it's also that come away with a very positive outcome. More environmentally sensitive, more loving to humanity, more one with the world, more peace. I don't know if I should flip a coin and say, take me. I might get the good or the bad. I don't know. But again, I'm not going to interpret what I'm doing. This is all alleged information by people who report these experiences. What boggles my mind, what raises my eyebrow, what keeps me up sometimes at night, is trying to figure out why the similarity. Is this a psychological condition we have not yet diagnosed? Unlikely. Highly unlikely. There's evidence of some type of form of interaction throughout millennia in varying ways that's unique at the times. I understand that. And this type of evidence, too, is part of what we're experiencing now. I think. I can't say 100%, but I'm trying to connect the damn dots. And there's a hell of a lot of dots, if I may say, out there. That's difficult to maneuver. Tie a visible string between them all. So it's a reasonable question. There are some very preliminary, highly tentative data associated with the question that was asked.
And that's actually a really good question. We have another one coming in. Do the numbers of reports that substantiate common descriptions give validity to the common stories?
We have not yet analyzed that. What is that word? Substantiate common descriptions give validity to common stories. I mean, is there a relationship between the type of species and the type of outcome experienced by?
Well, I think he's talking about common descriptions of the people's contact and abductions, etc., and so forth. Entities. He's saying entities. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's read that again. Do the numbers of the reports that substantiate common descriptions, and I'm thinking this is where the word entities goes in, give validity to the common stories.
So,
like grays or talls or blondes or, yeah.
Again, can't make a firm conclusion. I appreciate the question. There's certainly sticking a neck out on the limb saying gray equals good and reptilian equals bad. We don't simply have enough data, and that's not the emphasis of my book, for one thing, but it is an intriguing question. It does pertain to a subset of a few questions in our survey. There may very well be a connection. Generally, from what I gather, highly tentative, somewhat speculative. Human-lookings are nice people. Grays are a little emotionless, robotic, but they don't necessarily do no major harm. I could be wrong. Whereas, insectoids, reptilians, in part maybe because of their scary appearance. Not grays aren't too scary, but them more so. That might facilitate some adverse reaction in those who encounter it. Just highly elusive and tentative in nature is my response to that question. There's a long way to go before we can be conclusive about any of that.
And I think this is a good place maybe to speak on that for a moment about, what does a reptilian look like to you? What does a reptilian look like to me? I'm not sure why the screen isn't popping back and forth, but it should. Anyway, the idea here is the reptilians, the grays, and there's different grays, the tall grays, short grays, and I've heard some people say some are robotic, some are just totally emotionless. I have met the emotionless ones. I've not met one that was really robotic, but I've also met some that were like, you could tell that was almost like they were awakened, just newly awakened, and like, wow, I didn't know what emotion felt like. The world literally was new to them. Something changed in them. So I have met a few of those myself. And the reptilians are very interesting because they come in all shapes and sizes. When you look at our reptilian world here on this world, they come in all shapes and sizes and colors. And, some you got to be careful of because they will bite you and you will die. And some are just completely harmless and they're beautiful to look at, right? I think that is the way of all species. I truly do. And so I think it really is depending upon an individual's viewpoint or what their personal experience may have been. I don't think we need to cubbyhole all reptilians are bad or all insectoids are bad, although some people that's all they ever meet or experience is the negative. That doesn't mean that there isn't some good ones out there, right? There's always somebody that's different. They aren't all Borgs. And if you even if you bring it up the Star Trek thing, you talk about the Borgs, right? Well, there was a few that went rogue. There's always going to be some in the species, no matter how they were raised or their belief system or whatever. So I don't think across the board that you can say that any race, any species, is going to be 100% one way or the other, ever. Because then it takes away the individuality. And that is the random factor that's part of the whole physics thing that we can't understand. What makes people different, even if they're the same all the way down? What makes them different, right? It's to me, that's more fascinating than anything, is figuring that portion of it out.
Well, I'm also fascinated as to why some people have such experiences and why some people don't. Is it a random thing? Why people see some report seeing some species, some report seeing others? Maybe because that is the case. But why the similarity that these people report in great detail images, or descriptions, I should say, of certain type of beings that fit the mold of the others report? I know we could all watch the same movies, listen to the same thing, E.T. Phone Home. Is it a psychocultural hypothesis? Some contend that it is. We have our skeptics out there. Yeah, to a certain degree, and some it is. But some fantasy prone and schizotypical, whatever the term is, yeah, some percentage are, but etc. But there certainly are a certain percent of so-called normal individuals, whatever that means, well balanced within the bell curve, the right part of the bell curve, and they say the same kinds of detailed experiences that others, many thousands of others, say. So that again is that heavy-duty science? No, but it makes me question why. Is there an underlying neuropsychological, physiological abnormality that we have yet to uncover that gives rise to these kinds of unique experiences? Probably not. The scientific community thinks so. Probably so. Is there a drug to treat that? We'll find one, but in the meantime, let's give this to you, and you calm down and sit back, and we'll write in your record that psychotic term, whatever.
It's so sad. It's so sad. They think everyone's delusional.
Yeah, and to a large extent that's the case, which is part of the major problem. This should not be regarded as a pseudoscience. This should not be regarded as a new age thing. Serious scientists must sit back and do the necessary kind of work, if at all possible, to do, to try to advance our understanding of what's going on in maybe a more legitimate, valid way than what has ever been done prior. So we don't need those ongoing investigations, those ongoing TV shows. They're all fun. They're all interesting. You know, I watch it over, you know, Say Yes to the Stress or something like that. And the food, whatever. So you know, there's some room for it, but people think that that's all there is to ufology. The scientific community, political community denounce us, you know, people that are involved in research, organizations involved, as being pseudoscience, and in part it is. It does lack the scientific rigor that's required to address our better understanding of the phenomenon.
Well, okay, and addressing that portion of it, when you say that, would you say, well, first of all, I think, you know, now that I sit here and think about it, I'm probably going to answer my own question here. Because the UFO phenomenon was kept away from the public when, you know, during the Roswell, and even before the Roswell crash, it was kept away from the public and covered up, and, you know, lies, you know, the big lies began. I think that's probably one of the reasons why there isn't any more research into it, as far as for the general public is concerned, to help the people that are having the experiences or being abducted, or, you know, giving the hard evidence. Because under the, you know, Freedom of Information Act, you know, a lot of researchers that have went out and picked up these documents that are now being able to be released and are redacted. Every one of them. There's no information in them whatsoever. So it becomes useless in that sense, and research is necessary. How do we get there from here based on the actions of the government and those in charge and what they have done to cover this phenomenon up to begin with? How do we get there? How do we get the money for the research? How do we get that hard evidence? What do we do?
We can't throw the evidence down their throat and say, here it is, it's real, give us the money, support us. Many people in the government are sensitive to it, but and they want to support it, are believers. But which politician is going to say, the day before election day, I believe in UFOs and want to fund MUFON, allocate state monies towards this, or something to that effect. They're not going to come out as supporters, except for a very few, for fear of being criticized as being unstable, possibly, by some people. So it can potentially jeopardize their career if they jump in this direction. We can, I think, all understand that, as well as the academic community in general. There are exceptions. As well as military officials and service individuals who reveal this many years after their retirement through the Disclosure Project. But through the Freedom of Information Act, you're exactly right. Redacted, redacted, redacted. There are, however, some memos that have been released, written by high-ranking military officials, pilots, and others in terms of government and the military, as well as civilians, who have gone on the record, and their memos, their evidence has been revealed in various ways, facilitated through the Freedom of Information Act, which obviously indicates that it was a matter of considered great concern to the military and government back from the 40s on. That's a fact. They knew something was going on. In part, they thought maybe Russia had a secret weapon. And Russia thought, in part, that we may have had a secret weapon. And during the Cold War, throughout the 50s, this cat and mouse game that so-called UFOs tended to perform, unless there was some advanced military craft that existed then as well as now doing these kinds of feats, which is highly, highly, highly unlikely. These documents, from generals on down, are very revealing in the sense that they considered it to be a real phenomenon, potentially was a risk to aviation safety, but that it should be taken, interpreted as a matter of more greater importance and should be further studied. And they were right on. They were. Here again, was it withheld for so many years? Of course. Was that a conspiracy? Maybe. Was that up to politics? Yeah, maybe. I don't care what you call it. The point is, there's more than sufficient evidence, redacted alone, which indicates that that they knew it was going on. They're very, very highly concerned, and for fear of having to, well, for the need, for the feeling to have to suppress it from the public, for fear of panic. It's a fact. That's what they've said. Fear of, and Nick Pope, who was in a similar situation, who so-called manned the UFO desk as part of the Ministry of Defense back in the 80s and 90s. And we've chatted a few times on, and he clearly revealed there's been many, many cases. Reported that defy logical explanation. The photos, the videos were analyzed, and they were not considered fake. They were not considered as fakes. They were told to hush things up, play around with words to make sure the government got a little sense, but not the whole picture. They were very clever. Nevertheless, this goes on, and this goes on, and they should be more revealing. Yeah, but they should have been more revealing way back then. If they now reveal it decades hence, then they're afraid of the public's reaction. Why'd you keep the secret for so long? You know, who's the bad person? Let's have to have hearings on. Let's have hearings on it. What do you know now? You're still holding the secret. You're going to open up a whole so-called can of worms that the government doesn't want to address. They want to focus on more important things. They're getting reelected in the next election, right? So,
yeah, unfortunately.
so I mean, there's that element now. There's a lot of attention being drawn there by so-called exopoliticians. Is it important? Yeah, it's important at some level. It satisfies one's curiosity that Eisenhower thought it was a major deal, and he funded, along with some other people, studies to try to better understand the phenomenon. Oftentimes, we can go through the details that bore you, and you know these things. Your audience would be bored to tears, I think, if I went into details about the conclusions of some committees and investigations, which were, let's say, modified or tampered with or played down by higher-ups to suit their own particular needs, especially if it wasn't consistent with their position. So a lot of the people who led the charge, like Dr. Hynek, among others, felt that things weren't on the straight and narrow, weren't on the up and up, to their great dissatisfaction and their thoughts that they should never have gotten involved in the first place, you know, investigating this, since there was a different agenda that was going on. They were satisfying public appeal at the time to do something about it, to study the process when they, in a sense, gave the conclusion. For the most part, these studies said about 5% of all reported unusual, unexplained aerial events are unknown. Doesn't mean that they eventually would be known, but we can't explain them. So, nevertheless, out of the hundreds of thousands, millions, that's still a very large percentage. It doesn't mean they're all non-human intelligence. If it means any one of them are, I'm going to be objective for the moment now, and or they could all be. I'm not here to untwist anybody into believing one way or the other. Via my book, present the facts. I give some 2 cents worth of my position on things, yes, but for the vast majority of times, I attempt at least to let the reader interpret the information his or her own self. And I think that's the way it should be presented, because there's a ton of sense and there's a ton of nonsense out there in the literature, in all fields, not unique only to ufology, although I think in ufology there's more of that. I should say nonsense. And where my book falls in the spectrum is up to for the reader to decide. But it's hard to know how to separate fact from fiction, and that's sense from nonsense. It truly is. What may sound like nonsense is fact, and vice versa. People yearn for answers. They run to books. They try to find these such answers on all subject matter, not only ufology, and they come away shaking their head. It sounds cool, written well. Gee, there's people living on Mars and building greenhouses and all this sort of stuff, you know. Yeah, I don't know what to make sense of out there. And that's why when the names I mentioned, like Hynek and Mack, and there are others, Hopkins, there's a small group there. I listen to. The vast majority I've listened to and I'm not going to listen again. And again, let me commend all of them for their, again, motivation, interest, to help us better understand what is a phenomenon that must be researched, investigated. The priorities are right, I believe. The implications, again, on the individual, societal, spiritual, religious, etc., nature can potentially be pronounced. And for that purpose alone, I think, is worthy of more consideration from the scientific community. And by science, I mean the social sciences as well as the physical sciences, psychology, sociology, counseling, hypnotic regressionists, people with their credentials, which are highly commendable, from all walks, even some business people with a lot of money who can help fund research and provide necessary governance to this very complicated, ongoing research endeavor, which I hope occurs one day. Free, as I mentioned at the top of our broadcast, is a serious attempt in which to do so. And it's evolving. It's more people are gravitating towards it. And once we get the results out with tentative conclusions, it's scratching the surface, I know, but the point is it's the right direction, in my opinion. Many people may certainly disagree, but for the sake of redundancy, we need to move here again in that direction. And maybe the scientific community will then become more engaged, take us more seriously. When you think about it, though, there are something on the order of, I forget the number now, 66 6 trillion, something to that effect, galaxies. It's mind-boggling, the number, certainly, of planets, so-called exoplanets, that have been identified. And obviously, there's life elsewhere, and certainly much more advanced life. Interpreted by many ufologists, researchers, that the alien abduction phenomenon, in part, subserves the need to modify to their advantage DNA material, using our sperms and eggs as a gene pool. So maybe that is the case. I don't know if that's a bold leap trying to connect those dots or not. Is that the reason for the alien abduction phenomenon? Why do people report that they have been on board the so-called craft? Shapes vary considerably, from circles to disc shapes, saucer shape. That's the most common, but they vary in range and size from 10, 20 feet to miles long. They come in all different shapes, sizes, colors, speeds, you name it, and GM So the hypothesis is such that they're coming here from there. And of course, one has to consider quantum physics and the wormhole theories that have been proposed. And many leading physicists, like Einstein, for one, believe that wormholes allow them to get here from there in a blink of an eye, the folding of space, and thus you reduce distance considerably. So, maybe so. That could be proven, but theoretically a possibility. Multiverse, again, leading theorists, as I mentioned earlier, believe that alternative realities exist that coexist with ours. Some benign, maybe some not benign, which may account for the horrific experiences many individuals do report to have. And you have had direct, but people have unusual encounters, not necessarily only being on a physical craft, which they have described in detail. And pilots have described this in detail. Okay, we learned something about their physical maneuverability, their physical size, shape, color, kinematic behavior. That tells us something. A piece of grain on all the sands of all the beaches. It's informative. But the point here is that what? We simply need to address prospective approaches along the lines we're talking about. Focus more on the human element. Still do serious scientific studies. Try to create a stronger foundation upon which future research can build upon. Personal communication with them. We know firsthand and how traumatizing it can be. We don't know, obviously, why that is the case, what that objective was on their part, but all their objectives may be, and they may certainly be very different. So I don't know what we're dealing with. Something from far, far away, something from right in front of our face, but in a different non-local, so to speak, space-time environment. Or as some people propose, that they're from the future. This is something that Stephen Hawking, a contemporary leading theoretical physicist, contends is, in his mind at least, based on his experiments, so math, shall we say, impossible. Doesn't mean he's right. That is often